Well, Jamie Shea is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary General for Emerging Security Challenges at NATO and an Associate Fellow at Chatham House, and he's in London for us live. So thank you very much indeed for being with us. Charles Stratford was reporting to us there that he'd been speaking to Ukrainian soldiers who were saying that they were going to exploit the chaos, they said, and push towards Bakhmut. But this seems to have taken the Ukrainians by surprise as much as it appears to have done the Russians. Are the Ukrainians in a position to be able to take advantage of this if they choose to?
Well, they certainly are going to try to do that. But, of course, a lot depends on what plays out in Russia over the next few hours and days and the extent to which Prigozhin, having sort of started this mutiny, as Putin calls it, is really able to sort of turn it into an effective result. For example, pushing up, as he seems to be doing against Moscow, maybe persuading more of the Russian army to desert to his cause. There's no sign of that happening at the moment, maybe wringing some major concessions out of Putin in terms of sacking the defense minister Shoigu or Gerasimov, the chief of the general staff. So I think it really would have to achieve Prigozhin's actions a much greater dimension to really give the Ukrainians a massive boost. Let's keep our feet on the ground. The Russians still have 390,000 troops in Ukraine, which is an enormous number. They're well dug in defensively, and the Russians would need to really transfer quite significant numbers of troops, for example, their paratroopers, out of Ukraine to go and deal with Prigozhin to leave a big hole in the Russian lines.
Evgeny Prigozhin has been alleging that his fighters have been fired on by the Russian military. The leader of the Chechen fighters, who are also part of the Russian forces, has said that they're going to take action against Wagner if it's required. If this becomes a prolonged internal conflict, and let's not forget that Wagner fighters are tough guys who've been fighting for several months on the front lines in Ukraine. If this lasts for longer, what kind of impact would an unstable Russia have within Europe, but also worldwide?
Well, certainly we're seeing increasing signs that the Ukrainian conflict is bringing the chickens home to roost back in Russia itself. Even before the sort of opposition of Prigozhin to the Russian high command, you had these sort of shadowy Russian groups allied to Ukraine carrying out sabotage operations around Rostov-on-Don and just over the border. So this was already having a destabilizing influence. But again, I think we really have to keep our feet on the ground here. Prigozhin, according to estimates, doesn't have an awful lot of soldiers. Yes, you're right in saying they're battle hardened, but whereas he started the war with 50,000, by most experts, he's now down to about 10,000, maybe a few more. Can you really take on the Russian army and the Kremlin with just that number? Particularly, as I say, if over the next few hours he doesn't rally a lot of the Russian army to his cause. And the Russian commanders so far, according to what they've said to the media, have been firmly on the side of Putin, calling on Prigozhin to stop and indeed integrate his Wagner organization, as they've been calling on him to do for a long time, into the Russian armed forces. A lot of Prigozhin's troops are in fact out in Africa, in the Central African Republic, in Mali, in these operations which have suited the Kremlin's covert operations in Libya. And I don't think Prigozhin is going to be able to sort of bring those back to Russia anytime soon to support him. So I think we have to keep a good sense of perspective here. This is clearly an embarrassment for Putin. It's clearly going to weaken him. Of course, it's clearly going to make it harder for Russia to pursue any counter-offensive of its own in Ukraine, particularly in the weeks ahead. But whether Prigozhin is able really to topple the existing leadership is something where I still have my own personal doubts.
You mentioned before the spread of Wagner troops around the world, Syria, Mali, Libya, Central African Republic and Sudan. If Prigozhin goes, what do you think is going to happen to the structure of Wagner, given the fact, as you were talking about, that Russia regards Wagner as very much its own presence in those countries?
Yes, indeed. I think this is really the right question because Putin and Prigozhin have tried to avoid criticizing each other throughout this sort of controversy which has been going on between Prigozhin and the Russian commanders for some months now. Prigozhin is very much the creation of Putin, who has found him to be a highly useful instrument to carry out, for example, disinformation attacks against the United States elections, as Prigozhin has admitted, to have these incursions into Africa, which give the Russian state effective deniability, while bringing in enormous economic benefits to Russia in terms of diamonds and illegal mining and all of that. And at the same time, of course, 1 in 4 of the Russian forces fighting in Bakhmut, where the Russians have had the biggest success during the winter, have come from Wagner. So it's going to be very difficult, I think, for Putin to sort of get rid of Wagner, because it's been so helpful to him. But on the other hand, Prigozhin's sort of rebellion now may have pushed Putin into a corner where he may have to sacrifice Wagner in order to regain total control over the Russian military, but knowing that in the process he stands a lot to lose, because Prigozhin has also been a useful instrument to Putin in terms of dividing the Russian military and giving him greater control himself. So whether he can still keep Prigozhin on by carrying out a negotiation which gives Prigozhin something of what he wants, and Prigozhin, as a result, decides to stand down and to remove his sort of occupation of Russian military facilities in Rostov, or whether Putin now thinks that a split is necessary and he has to crush Wagner. I think that's what we're going to learn over the next 24 hours.
Really interesting to get your thoughts on this. Jamie, Shea, as always, thank you very much indeed for being with us on Al Jazeera.
Thank you.